Welcome back to the Loyally Podcast, where we explore radical healing and embodied living through power of holistic wellness. And today we're joined by a very special guest, Jim Rinere. His author name is James Francis, and he wrote the book There's Coffee in the Fridge, which is a very powerful memoir about his journey through depression and into healing through holistic modalities. We're not only fans of his story, but we're honored to be collaborating with James for a series of special events this July at Lowly.
So, Jim is a C-suite executive. He's a professional speaker, a high school lacrosse coach. He has written this really epic book called There's Coffee in the Fridge, and that's what we want to talk to him about. Not necessarily about coffee, but about the story of this great book that really warmed my heart and spoke to me so intensely. So thanks for being with us. I know, the way that we know you is through the professional speaking class that we took together. That was about a 9-month course. And over that time, we got to know you well and learn of your story and just the transformation that took place in your life. So we're so happy to have you with us today and for you to share how you got from A to B, because this is a big story.
Yeah, no, guys, I appreciate the invite, and I really am so happy to know you both. Your story is amazing as well, and so I'm really happy to be here.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, Jim.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So let me just tell you, in reading your book, I struggled with anxiety, but not depression. And it opened my eyes so deeply to what depression looks like for people and just how it just encapsulates, the air you breathe even. So can you tell us about that? Because it gave me such empathy and such deep compassion for people who deal with this.
I think for me, anxiety leads to depression. My anxiety episodes can sink me into a depression. And the thing about depression is it's silent. If you had known me 25 years ago, you would have thought I was the happiest person going because that was the face that I put on.
Yeah.
And so it's really difficult for people that are depressed to let other people in. And so they can't know whether you're depressed or not if you don't allow that. And I think a lot of people are walking around on the edge of depression or in depression without really knowing it or acknowledging it. And
Yeah.
for me, my depression started when I was 12 years old. And there's a story I tell in the book about the first time that I really acknowledged that I was depressed. And when a kid, well, we grew up around the same time. At that point in history, if I had raised that issue or if I even knew the language around it, nobody really would have paid any attention. Even
Right.
today, if a 12-year-old says they're depressed, people will say, no, you're not depressed. You're just sad. And so I think the stigma around it is one of the things that blocks people from actually opening up and moving down the path of trying to heal. I also think for men specifically, it's about weakness, right? If I say that I'm depressed or I'm anxious or I'm lonely as a man, I'm viewed as weak, and that's a fatal flaw, right? Especially
Right.
in the areas that I hang around in, which is business and athletics and
Right.
sort of male-dominated places.
Yeah.
You can't show that kind of weakness, and so the reason why I've chosen to tell my story is because I have learned that actually sharing the weakness takes a lot more courage and a lot more guts than not to.
Yeah.
But more importantly, people are open to having that conversation. And you said that you've developed some empathy now that you've read a little bit more about my depression. That has been my experience. When I talk to people, even people that I work with, right? I might not know them very well, but once they learn that I've written this book and we talk openly a little bit about some of these mental health issues, every single person, there may have been a couple here and there that haven't reacted positively, but most people react very positively and with open arms. And then it opens up a deeper conversation which is ultimately what I'm trying to do. That's why I wrote my story, is so that
Yeah.
people can break down these barriers and actually connect in a real way.
Yeah.
And you do that
Amen to
so
that.
beautifully, and so, I mean, like it was really tender and sincere and no holds barred. And it's a lovely story of
Yeah.
I
of
appreciate that.
of where you came from to where you are now. And it didn't happen overnight, did it?
No, and so your question about going from point A to point B, it's kind of like getting to point B, you got to go through C and then W and then R and then M. It's definitely not a linear journey, right?
No.
Just like with some of the healthcare stuff that you guys have dealt with,
Right.
um, you go down the path that you need to go down at that moment in time, and sometimes you double back, and then you go around again, and then you come back, and so it's a process, So for people listening, and what we'll talk about when I come down in late June, I basically surrendered because I wanted to die and tried to kill myself, and fortunately failed. And happy to have failed at something. um,
Yeah, I know you don't fail often. Yeah.
no, I do, but I try to hide those failures.
Yeah.
But this one, I'm happy to say I absolutely failed miserably. And you know, coming out of the hospital, so I spent some time in the hospital to learn how to deal with my medication and be safe, so that people were not in danger around me, and so that I wasn't out in danger. Um, but coming out of the hospital, essentially had a choice. How do you want to live your life? Do you want to sweep this under the carpet and move forward like nothing ever happened, or do you want to really openly embrace this part of who you are? And for me, that was the answer. I chose, and my wife and I worked on this together a lot, chose to be very open about it and honest about it. And um, that was essentially a big part of the healing for me, right? I had to be, hey, look, this is not who I am. It's part of my experience.
Right.
But the overall goal for me was to go back in time, back to, that 6, 7, 8-year-old kid that went
Yeah.
through whatever traumas he went through, and really understand it. And, it's not about pointing blame, but it's about understanding what happened, why it happened, how it happened, so that you can move through it. And so embracing trauma allows you to break through. And thankfully, it's the thing that I needed to do to be able to control my depression.
Yeah.
So that's probably one of the biggest learnings that came out of this for me.
Yeah.
What are the methodologies that you use to stand toe to toe with your shadow self?
I think that So I've developed what I call my roadmap to health, and
Okay.
sometimes I call it the roadmap to connection, because ultimately that's what this is about. It's about connecting with yourself. When you connect with yourself, you can connect with others. If you can't connect with yourself effectively, it's really impossible to connect with others in a deep and meaningful way. So there's essentially 10 things that I practice. Not every day. I strive to practice every day, but more often than not. And they're really simple, right? They're not easy, but it is a simple list, and it's nothing new, nothing that we don't all understand.
Yeah.
But at the top of the list is meditation. I call it slowing down to speed up. And for somebody like me, and when I stand in front of a room full of business executives, people that, are type A, hard driving, people that are competitive, the thought of slowing down is almost impossible to get their head around and to understand. But when you can do that, and so I meditate 2 or 3 times a day. That is one thing that I am pretty consistent with. And when I say meditation, I'm not talking about, sitting on a mountain somewhere completely away from the world, right?
Yeah.
I'm talking
Yeah.
about 2 or 3 minutes. You're in your car, you're driving down the highway, pull
Yeah.
off to the side and meditate for a couple of minutes. It's really simple, but it allows you to become more connected with yourself, more collaborative, more attached, connected to the world around you. So meditation is one. Journaling is two. I find a lot of solace in writing. The book was my journal, basically. It was a 10-year journal
Yeah.
that I had put together and said, this could be a story, and this is how I would tell my story. The third thing is living real connection. So, having people like you come into my life and really connect with people and have conversations about what's going on in their world, to me, that feels really good. Exercise. I try to exercise 5 times a week. I don't put a schedule on it, but I can tell you that I know when I'm slipping into a deeper anxiety when I'm not exercising, right? It's
Right.
like a trigger. It's amazing to watch. Um, I live gratitude. I think living gratitude and being honest about what you can be grateful for. And it's funny, it's not funny, but it's curious. I just had a conversation with someone online uh, on TikTok about being grateful. They said everything's broken, my life is miserable, I can't be grateful for anything. There's nothing to be grateful for. And I lived that. I get that, right? The
Yeah.
reality is there's always something. So like I wrote down the other day that I was grateful for my legs. Like it's
Yeah.
that simple, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My legs have carried me for 60 years through this life, and
Yeah.
so I'm really happy about that. But living gratitude, it takes practice, and it's really important. Being present, so being here and now, right now in this moment, and the most present thing you have in your life is your breath. And so I try to live like that. I try to be present as respiration, right? You don't have to think about it. It's happening right now, all the time. Um, Forgiveness. Forgiveness is a huge one. And for me personally,
Yeah.
it was a really big thing that I needed to understand and to get to. I can forgive others who have harmed me, and there's some traumas in my book that I outline, and
Yeah.
people did things to me that were very traumatic.
Yeah.
It was easy, again, not simple, but easy to forgive other people for hurting me. It
Right.
was not easy to forgive myself for being in the situations that I was in. I literally punished myself for decades because I allowed these people to hurt me, you know. And one of
Yeah.
the traumas that I mentioned in the book, I was 6 years old. You can't take care of yourself, right? You're a little
No.
kid. But letting go of that, and being someone who forgives is really important. The next one would be consistent sleep. Really simple, right? We all
Yeah.
know you got to get some consistent sleep, but for me, and for someone that suffers from anxiety or depression or both, having a consistent sleep pattern is critically important. If I don't go to bed at 10 o'clock at night, the next day I am not good. I'm just not me. It's hard for me to function at an optimal level. Um, and then eating the right foods, right? Again, I try to practice these things every day, but once in a while you have something that you want to treat yourself with. That's cool, but I can't do that every day, right?
Right.
And then the last thing is just drinking a lot of water. So that's my list. Those are my 10 things. That's my roadmap to health, my roadmap to connection, and those are the practices that I try to follow.
And you're right. They're not new, right? We know these things, but I know that you're a very disciplined person, and like you do these things. How do you
Yeah.
keep track of it, Jim? Do you have is it a mental list now, or how would you recommend that someone else engage in the same practices and have the consistency?
When I started taking care of myself down this path of learning about really what I needed to do, I had an accountability person. My therapist at the time,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
literally wrote down every day these 10 things that I was doing, right? And at the time, it wasn't 10, it might have been 8 or 9, maybe 15. I don't know. It's been
Right.
refined. But I would journal every day. This is what I ate. This is when I went to bed. This is how much water I drank. And I would bring it into a therapy session. That
Yeah.
person made me accountable. And then over time, it just became a discipline. And so now I can just tell when I'm off, and if I'll give you an example, right? So you mentioned that I coach high school lacrosse
Right.
right now, and I have a full-time job and I run a consulting business and I write and I do a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
Because I coach lacrosse, that's like a 2.5 hour window every day. And so logistically, my days are pretty crazy right now until the spring season is over. I've
Yeah.
got 3 more weeks. So I know that I'm not really doing everything I need to do to take care of myself. So a couple days ago, pretty stressful. It's cold here in the Northeast. It was raining. We had to practice outside. I had a really hard time sleeping. The next night, I was up late because we were watching some TV show. I don't remember what it was. And I went to bed late, right? the next day I woke up and I was like, oh crap, man, I'm not feeling good. Something's going on. And then I just went back 48 hours and worked my way forward and
Yeah.
outlined what happened, And I was like, okay, now you got to course correct today and do that. Um, but I don't write down now what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's just automatic. It's been 20 years. So this is just how I live. And I know that, but my point is, I know when something's not going right, when I don't feel good, I can
Yeah.
always go back over the last couple of days and figure out what's missing.
Yeah. That's
Which,
incredible.
which is
I like
so
that.
that's so valuable to be able to catch that before it starts to spiral out of control. Like how are you using your breath to be more attuned to your spirit and to be more sensitive to these kinds of things, or is it the process of all of these things
No,
that helps you
it's
get back, backtrack to get to where, like, okay, this is why I'm not feeling good today. This is
yes,
why my energy level isn't where I would like it to be.
yes, 100%. And meditation for me allows me the quiet time to do that. So
Yeah,
you're 100% accurate. It's all about breath. And,
yeah,
so two things. I wrote my book because I had read probably 350 self-help books, right? In the psychology area, depression,
yeah,
positivity, intention, everything under the sun. And not one book, and they were all valuable in some way, not one of those books was written in my language, right? In the way that I talk. And so I wrote my book for people that are afraid of all this sort of esoteric kind of great ideas from people that have great degrees. I'm just a
yeah,
guy and I swear a lot and I talk plainly. And so I wrote my book for people so they could cut through some of the bullshit out there in terms of these kind of froofy things that are out in the world. And again, they're all valuable, but they don't say to me, grab me by the shoulders and say, dude, this is what you need to do, right? So
Yeah.
that's why I wrote the book the way that I did. And when I
Okay.
talk to people about meditation, I don't typically call it meditation because people think they have these sort of preconceived notions of sitting on a mountaintop, and I don't have time for this. And so
yeah,
I just say, listen, we need to slow down a little bit to connect with ourselves, connect with our breath and our thoughts so that we can ground in what it is that we're actually looking for. If you
yeah.
can't establish quiet time for yourself and give yourself that kind of love, it's virtually impossible to really identify what you're missing, what you need, what your desires are. And so, that to me is really important.
Yeah.
It's so valuable, and I know nature is a big part of
Mm.
anchoring in, coming back home, feeling connected to source, and deep appreciation.
Yes, 100%. I am fortunate. I live 5 minutes from a beach, and so
Yeah,
I spend a lot of time
Nice.
sitting on the rocks, breathing and thinking about life.
yeah,
And again, it doesn't need to be a long time. It's 4 or 5 minutes. I posted a video on TikTok last week. I had a really rough week. It was a Friday night. I just finished lacrosse practice. It was like 7 o'clock at night, and I just needed to stop. I just needed time to stop. And I called my wife and I said, "Hey, I'm going to be a little later. I need to sit on the rocks." And I just went down there and I sat there for 8 minutes. And then I recorded this video just to say to people, look, where's your spot? Find your spot. Where's your slow down spot? And this is my spot. I sat on this bench for 8 minutes and just quieted everything down. And I walked out of there and I was like, man, I feel great. And that's
so
how it happens. It's really that simple.
Yeah.
do you do you have a mantra, like a phrase or a mantra that you use that centers you?
Yeah, no, I don't. I really don't. I meditate. I use Om quite a
Yeah,
bit when I really need to ground and shut down. I also use Om Mani Padme Hum, which is sort of a common general energy release. I
yeah,
use those, and sometimes, and more often than not, I'm really just following my breath. When I first started to meditate, and when I teach people meditation now, I use music quite a bit. So
yeah,
I'll play a song that they may or may not know, 3 minutes. People tend to focus a little bit better when they've got some sort of a rhythm happening.
yeah,
And so that's what I try to bring people into is we're going to use music. This is how we're going to follow it. But for me now that I've been meditating for so long, it's really about my breath. And if I sit down on the water, I might listen to the water hitting the rocks. And that's kind of where I go. And that becomes my mantra.
That's so awesome. I wake up with an expectancy of like, okay, surprise and delight me, right? Because I know that I'm not going to have a spoiler alert for anybody, but you have such a beautiful story of a miracle that happened to you when it was really rough, like the end day. And that miracle, I think of that often for you, and I'm so grateful for it, because look what you're doing. Look how you were saved. And I do believe that the universe is always conspiring for our good. And
Yeah, I agree.
and just looking out for us. And if we can just have that glimmer, that one little thing, or be that glimmer for somebody else, we make a difference.
Yes. And I think part of creating vulnerability for yourself and your life allows you to hear and realize how valuable you are to the people around you.
Yeah.
So part of the thing that was driving me to want to suicide was that I believed everybody would be better off without me here.
Yeah.
And if you had talked to me 25 years ago, and we were connected in a way that I wasn't with pretty much anyone other than my wife, that is exactly what I would have told you, that I have no value. Everybody would be better off without me here. And, I come to learn now, when I connect with people, I realize what I'm bringing to the party, that there is a value there. It is a huge value there. And the person that I'm connected with has a huge value in my life. And so I think we need to tell each other that more.
Yeah.
And I think that's what people need to hear. I was talking to a group recently about suicide, and it's a group of teenagers. And, one of the things that frustrates me about going to funerals for people that have suicided is that everybody always says, I wish that he had told me this. I wish that he had shared this, right? Rather than sharing it when it's too late, let's share it now.
Right.
Let's talk about it right now. And so that's ultimately what I'm trying to do with my book and my story is get people to talk about these things. Yeah, they're difficult topics. Nobody wants to talk about dying. Nobody wants to talk about depression. But you know what? It's everywhere, and we need to talk about it.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
We are so thrilled you're going to come visit us in Houston. And the format for when you're coming, and it is June 26th and June 28th that you'll be in Houston, presenting to a group at Lowly. And it's going to be an intimate setting. We're going to cap it at 12 people. And you're going to lead a meditation, and we're going to plunge in sauna together, and then you're going to tell your beautiful story. And our greater purpose on this is giving people the opportunity to be in a container of space that they get to be vulnerable with each other, because that's what happens when you get in really cold water. Is there some vulnerability that shows up? And you breathe together, and it just raises the social efforts in the room. And I'm really hoping that these will forge lasting connections and friendships where people do not feel so alone, that we do know that we have community and a place to belong, and that we're here for a reason and a purpose, and our life is significant. Doesn't matter. And it's not about what we do. It's about becoming who we are, like who we are intended to be. So
I love that.
Excited about that.
And I think that the work that you two are doing is number 11 and 12 on the roadmap, right? It's the heat and the cold and the cold and the heat. And it's such an important part of the practice of life, right? I've shared with you that I've been cold plunging for 15 years.
Yeah.
And I don't have a fancy cold plunge. I live near the water, and I go down to the Long Island Sound, and I jump in the water, and I breathe. And in the wintertime,
that's the best water, just so you know.
Yeah, well,
natural water.
I had to tell you, my son lives in Sweden. He plunges in a lake or in the ocean where he is. And it's just part of their life, right? He goes down to this place half a mile from where he lives, and he goes in the sauna, and then he goes down the steps into the ocean. And it's just part of the way that they live. But he was here in December, and we went down to the Sound, Long Island Sound, and he's in there for 5-6 minutes. I went in. I was good for like a minute and a half. It was freaking cold. Holy
It's
moly.
legitimately cold.
It was shocking. Yeah. Even
Yeah,
for someone that has plunged for a long time, it was cold.
yeah.
It was the coldest water temperature in Connecticut in the last 20 years.
Oh
It-
Oh,
wow,
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
cold.
oh wow. Was there ice floating in it?
There wasn't, but it was cold. And
Wow.
I didn't learn that until after. Like the next day, I was like, dude, I said to my son, I'm like, buddy, I've never been in anything that cold in my life. And he was
Yeah,
like, yeah, it was pretty cold.
yeah,
And we looked it up and they said, yeah, it was the
yeah.
coldest water temperature in 20 years. So
But how did you feel after, Jim?
amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, there's
Yes.
a lot of studies about the colder the water is, the more norepinephrine you create, and you don't have to stay in as long. So I'm a big
Yeah.
fan of that colder water too.
That's a great point. Yeah. No, I felt
Yeah.
amazing. And you know what it's like, right? You get out and you feel
Yeah.
electric. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man.
Yes.
And it fights depression, because it's a
Yes.
shock to the body and it gets the inflammation out of the brain and you get that dopamine. And then when you do it with somebody, especially somebody you love, like your son, it's a special moment.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah. It's amazing. I
yeah,
love
I
it.
love
So,
hearing that.
yeah, no, it's great. So I think the work that you two are doing is magical. I really do, and I'm
Thank
really excited to come down and share in the community.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank
it is amazing, Jim. It's a gift every time that we see somebody discover it for themselves, and it makes such an impact in their lives. And when they meet a friend there, you see these people
Mm.
come in. When they first come in, they look depressed, they look down, they look sad, and then a month later you see them and they're happy again, and they got friends and they've got a reason to do things, and so it's just such a gift to watch that and to be a part of it. Um, you know.
Great,
Yeah.
great.
And I'm not a great meditator. Like you were probably a much more disciplined meditator, but I can do this for 3 minutes. Like I can
Mm.
get in cold water and just focus on my breath, only my breath. And I come out a better woman than the one that went in. I
Yeah,
promise you.
yeah,
Better,
sure.
better to everybody, but mostly better to myself, kinder to myself, more forgiving of myself, more loving to myself, and more connected to purpose.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
that,
you just brought up a good point. Part of what I talk about with people is I've got this list of things, right, that work for me. But not everything on that list is going to work for you, and
yeah,
you have to create your own list, right? And so if you don't
Yeah,
want to meditate or if it doesn't work for you, then cold plunge or do something else, right? Find out what that is. I think a lot of people feel like, I've got this list of things that somebody else does and this is what I need to follow. And no, it's not the case. Just keep trying to find the right path for yourself. And the last thing is too, self-connection is what it's all about, right? If you
yeah,
can't love
yes,
yourself, you can't possibly love anybody else.
you can't.
And if I came to you tomorrow and said, "Hey, I need to borrow a car. I need your help. I need to borrow your car." You'd lend me your car, right?
Sure.
We need to help ourselves first.
mm,
Why is it so difficult for us to say, "I need help"? Like I could say to you, "I need help." You could ask me for help anytime and I would help you 100%. But we don't take the time to ask ourselves for help. There's nothing more important in life in my mind than being able to help yourself. Once you help yourself, you can help others in a really connected way. But helping yourself for a lot of people is just really difficult. It's hard to give yourself that kind of love.
yeah. Yeah, I struggle with that myself. And actually, what changed my life, Jim, is my friend committed suicide, a man I worked with. And after that happened, I personally decided to become uber honest. Like, I will not tell a lie for nothing.
Mm.
And when I did it, it changed my life in such a dramatic way, but I also forgave myself of guilt and shame and stuff like that. And I really started loving myself. And when I did, that's when I really started changing and becoming the person that I am now. And
Yeah, that's awesome.
it's
Yeah.
very
That's
hard to
awesome.
love yourself. Like you say, it's the strangest thing, but
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah.
yeah, it's true.
Yeah. Well, we're so excited to have you. And I know that sometimes like maybe a wife will come to one of your sessions, and then the next session she'll bring her husband, or a person will come and they'll bring a friend or someone
Sure.
significant to them. And so I would encourage people to, we're going to have our calendar open to book your sessions and to get to know you and spend some time with you. And I would just encourage people to really thinking of someone that this could be beneficial for, like a work colleague or work team member, or anybody that they feel like this would resonate with, that just come to Loli and let's have this experience together, because you are being so generous with your time and so loving to us, and we appreciate you so much. And you have such a big story that it's just going to bless everybody that it touches. You are going to do great things in this world, and I'm so grateful to you and your family. And I know that's another part of the story too, is rebuilding those relationships and having trust come back into your lives, and just showing up for each other and being together in this. So this
I
is
love
going
it.
to be
I'm
good.
excited. I would say that it will be fun, right? People need to know we're not going to talk about depression and be sad. We're going to talk about depression and be happy. It'll be fun.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah,
It's going to
yeah.
be amazing.
Yes.
It's
It
going to be
will.
amazing.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for being on our Lowly Lounge podcast.
Yeah.
And this is our first one,
Yeah.
if you
love
didn't
it.
notice.
I love it.
And you're like, we're just so honored, and we're just amped to have you, man.
I'm really excited. I love you both. What you're doing is amazing. And anything I can do to help, I'm really excited about it.
Oh, thank you, Jim.
Thank you. I'm back at you.
Yeah,
So
I
we
love
will
you too.
see you. We will see you in June.
Yes. Awesome.
All right.
All
Well,
right,
thank
my
you
friend.
so much. And we'll have copies of your book. And even if people can't make it, how can they connect with you? And like online, we'll post all this in the show notes. But what's the
Great.
best way to get in touch with you?
So the website is there'scoffeeinthefridge.com. If they're on TikTok, there's coffee in the fridge. Instagram, there's coffee in the fridge. That's basically where everything resides.
Okay.
And like you said, we'll have books, and I'm happy to sign books and talk to people for as much time as they want while I'm there. So I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to it.
And if they can't make it, I know that you do engagements like corporate events and that. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing speaking wise.
Yeah, so when I first started to do this, I wrote the book as a cathartic exercise for myself. I never really thought about it going out into the world. And I actually started to bring the practices that I use into my work environment. So I started to teach people I work with how to meditate, and we would meditate before meetings. And so I'm realizing now that it has a huge positive impact on the businesses that I run and the athletic teams that I coach. And so I've started to develop this speaking business, and so I've got keynote speeches around specific topics around men's mental health, around self-connection, optimal team performance, and so people can hire me to do that. That's actually the thing that I love the most is getting up in front of a group of people and talking about my story and the things that I do and why. The positive impact on people when they connect has a huge impact on teams, especially business teams. People need to learn how to communicate more effectively, how to be more connected, more collaborative. And so I do spend a lot of time in that area. And so businesses hire me to do keynote speeches at corporate events.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Well, we're going to put this out there, and we are so happy to have you in our hometown, and we will see you soon.